Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as 15 hours, but hey, it's something. This is the last week before Election Day, and with that, I'm actually going to include a poll in the, community tab, because the one thing I've been debating on is whether or not I should do a final election prediction one episode, right before the election happens, because the next episode is going to come out the day before the election. So it's really the last day I can get any predictions in. Or if you would want to just see anything else. Although I think if I just do that one and then just have that be the options, anything else versus election prediction, I think a lot of people would probably want an election prediction. For that one, I might even be visual, so I can do one of those map things. I think I've already enticed people enough to vote for election breakdown or something. And it's going to be weird because literally the next episode after that will basically be me reacting to how the elections went down. And then basically we'd get the final episodes of the years or whatever. I guess that's incentive to not sub to me to get to 100 subs yet because, plans or whatever. I usually like to have the milestones dedicated specifically to said topics. But yeah, I probably will be doing an election breakdown or prediction breakdown or whatever right before the election, Why not? Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, massive W in foreign elections, or not foreign elections, but foreign news. Same-sex marriage is legalized in all of Mexico states. Lawmakers in the border state of Tamaulipas voted Wednesday night to legalize same-sex marriages, becoming the last of Mexico's 32 states to authorize such unions. The measure to amend the state's civil code passed with 23 votes in favor, 12 against, and 2 abstentions, setting off cheers of "Yes, we can" from supporters of the change. Now here's the thing about the whole debacle over same-sex marriage in Mexico. You see, technically, this is an issue that was supposedly long solved. In 2015, the Supreme Court made gay marriage, they said that laws against people's marriages should be, that kind of stuff should be outlawed, essentially legalizing gay marriage. But what happened was Mexico being a heavily Catholic nation, took their sweet-ass time to finally go through every single state. It was usually because the big three parties at the time, the PRD, PAN, and PRI, didn't really care that much about gay rights issues. The PAN, and I guess to an extent, the PAN would probably be very openly opposed to it. Although I don't even think necessarily. It's that they literally didn't care. Because a lot of the times when these gay marriage votes happen, a lot of PAN members usually flip. Usually they will back gay rights or gay marriage. It's basically not even necessarily a partisan issue. The only thing that became partisan is something we'll get into in a bit, because a certain party was basically telling them to speed up the process, I guess. But anyways, there's not much else I could say except big W for Mexico. Hopefully this is codified into law so that the next Mexican president doesn't try to smash it down, proposing that it's not who who. But anyways, speaking of foreign news, one interesting thing happened in regards to foreign stuff that seemed interesting and then became not interesting. Okay, so the Congressional Progressive Caucus on October 24th, 2022, released a letter urging Congress to propose diplomatic solution to the Ukrainian war. The Russian-Ukrainian war, remember, that's still going on. So a group of 30 members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus sent a letter to Biden urging him to pursue direct diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine. And it has a lot of the usual suspects. I'll just list the full list right here. Jayapal, Alma Adams, Earl Blumenauer, Jamal Bowman, Cory Bush, Andre Carson, Yvette Clarke, Peter DeFazio, Mark DeSalenur, Chuy Garcia, Raul Grijalva, Sheila Jackson-Lee, Sarah Jacobs, Henry Hank Johnson, Monder Jones, Rokana, Barbara Lee, Gwen Moore, Marie Newman, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Donald Payne Jr., Shelley Pingree, Mark Buchanan, Ayanna Presley, Jamie Raskin, Mark Takano, Rashida Tlaib, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, and Nydia Velasquez. And it was endorsed by a lot of groups that in regard to peace. Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security, Just Foreign Policy, Friends Committee of National Legislation, Move On, Peace Action, Physicians for Social Liberty, the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and Win Without War. It was and here's the thing. Here's the thing about the letter. The letter was incredibly benign. Like, I mean, here's the thing about the left in regards to, like, NATO. Like, the left unilaterally usually hates, like, stuff like NATO, hates, like, the, like, Western powers, and they'll usually, like, be very open about this. But the thing is, like, this one is incredibly benign. It basically says, like, yes, we agree that Ukraine should defend itself. Yes, we agree that Russia is bad. But they literally just say they want peace, and they want a diplomatic solution to the effort, which is something that everybody agrees with. As the letter puts, Zelensky called for diplomacy. Like, it's like, truly, there was no problem with the letter. It was incredibly benign. I know I use that a lot, but it's like, literally, it was so milquetoast basic peace talk. Like, we want diplomacy. We do not want World War III. We want peace. It's like, yeah, this is pretty basic stuff. All right? But here's the thing. When that letter was released, immediately, the entire U.S. war machine, the entire neoliberal establishment, the entire, like, press hammered hard against it. They were like, oh, they're basically teaming up with Putin now. And like I said, I'll include a link to the freaking letter in the description, or a tab, or whatever. This letter is incredibly benign. The letter was very bland and basic. And it was like, yeah, this is basically what you could expect from the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Like, you have, like, worldwide socialist organizations, like, say that NATO is, like, the next fascism of the Axis or whatever. And it's like, yeah, they'll have, like, extremely harsher words. They could have used, like, tons of harsher words. These were, like, very basic, benign stuff. But then the U.S. media basically turned it all around and went, oh, look, the Congressional Progressive Caucus are essentially, like, everybody went around claiming that these guys were, like, pro-Putin, even though, again, nothing in the letter was like that. Like, and you had people who were saying what I was saying, like, oh, it's benign and basically nothing, and then using that as criticism, also alongside using the criticism of, oh, it's Putin puppet talk. It's an incredibly weird double-edged sword that it seems that Ukraine's super hard Ukraine supporters have. Like, on one end, they'll go, the U.S. should be more involved, but then when the U.S. says, okay, so our involvement is going to be trying to negotiate a peace effort between you two, it's all of a sudden, it's like, no, you're overstepping your boundaries, you can't do it. It's like, which is it? Do you want us to be more involved, or do you not want our say? Because you can't have it both ways. Like, literally, unless you are pro, like, actual World War III, there was literally nothing to oppose in that letter. And the backlash was so bad that the Progressive Caucus, the next day, withdrew the letter, claiming that it was a mistake that it was published. And that basically almost made me change the thing that was going to be the main subject of this video, because it's like, but it's like, no. It's not time yet. They'll get their time when it's time. Since we don't have that many episodes in the year left, they've bought themselves basically until the next calendar date. But their time will come soon enough. The letter shouldn't have been withdrawn because the letter wasn't that bad. There's literally nothing else to say. Moving on to the next story, which is kind of a W. So the Chicago mayoral race just got another candidate by the name of Brandon Johnson. Now, Brandon Johnson is a Cook County commissioner who is, like, running to be, like, who's basically trying to run as, like, the progressive candidate in the race. And we're going to be getting that again. Because the thing about the Chicago mayoral race is that it always happens to be a battle between the progressives / like, the populists or whatever. Like, whatever you want to call them. Like, the progressives or the anti-establishment or the, like, populists. The people who run, like, anti-machine. And then the people who run pro-machine. And what ended up happening last cycle was, of course, we ended up getting two people who were running as, like, we're the anti-machine candidate. And then people had to end up choosing which one do they think is really the anti-machine candidate. Lo and behold, they made the choice that did not necessarily live up to the anti-machine rhetoric that they claimed to. And now she's become the machine, and now people are running against her to replace her. It's kind of funny. It's like they became what they sought to destroy, whatever. Now, Johnson is very interesting because Johnson actually, similar to other progressive people like Cori Bush, Johnson started their career as an activist, starting out as being an activist for the Chicago's Teachers Union. I think they helped organize the 2012 Chicago teacher strikes. And then when it came time for the 2019 public school strikes, when he was an elected official, he spoke in solidarity of them. And many people indicated that there was a chance that he could, lead an effort to, push for him to be mayor after that, do that, take that momentum and then translate it to the mayoralship. He originally said that was laughable, but lo and behold, they were right. Now, this makes sense considering that the race is going to be in February of 2023, so I guess it is time for people to start finalizing whether or not they run. The only thing that I think makes this interesting is the fact that if Brandon Johnson is this very high-profile progressive running, does that mean that he has essentially kicked Chuy Garcia out of the race? Because, like I said, the race is on February, so Chuy does not have that much time to run. Though, to be fair, I guess he wouldn't necessarily need that much time because he's already a well-known name in Chicago. But it is kind of like my one lingering, tiny hope, oh, please, Brandon, please have this be the thing that kicks Chuy Garcia out of the race. I want him to stay in Congress, please. Speaking of a municipal election that has broader things, I guess, we're going to be talking about the LA mayoral race because one big thing happened that has caused some debacles over the LA mayoral race. Okay, so for those who don't know, the LA mayoral race is a race between Rick Caruso and Karen Bass. Now, here's a little thing you need to know about the two candidates. Rick Caruso was a former Republican who literally just changed his party affiliation to become the Democrat just so he could become viable in the LA mayoral race. Meanwhile, Karen Bass is a longtime member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus who had some more radical leanings in the past. Apparently at one point before she entered Congress, she was friends with a Communist Party activist, even giving a eulogy at his funeral. Bass was even floated as a potential Biden VP choice just because of her sort of progressive-ish leanings, because she was it was one of those things where she was just progressive enough to get people to like her on the left, but just not enough progressive to have the moderates not worry that she'll be a firebrand or whatever. And that was basically how she was. She was basically considered the most progressive candidate in the race, because I think there were a couple of other people in the race, but it was her versus the main three were basically her, Kevin De Leon, and Rick Caruso, and it's one is a former Republican, she is member of Progressive Caucus, and Kevin De Leon has that sort of I'm sort of progressive-ish thing, but is now currently in a lot of heat because of racial remarks that he made. So it's it seems that of the candidates chosen, she is the most progressive. So naturally, most of the progressives who are even getting involved in this race would probably be vocally supporting her. Well, it turns out there's at least one progressive that has a wildly different stance on this race. That person being Cenk, who made a lot of very interesting statements in regards to this race. Here's the first one. LA is a mess. There's trash all over the roads. Cops don't respond to calls. It's close to anarchy here. Is Garcetti already in Mumbai? Is anyone running this city? Karen Bass seems to be saying she's going to maintain the status quo. She knows how to work with the system. No thanks. Then someone asked, does this mean you're backing Caruso? To which he responded, yes. Karen Bass's main message seems to be she's an establishment Democrat, no interest, who thinks things in LA are generally fine. They're not, and will work the system better. The problem is the system. There's nothing but incompetence and corruption here. We need change. And progressives, of course, all basically went, are you freaking kidding me? And all started attacking him. It's one person, Dante Atkins, said, so you, who supposedly are a progressive and believe that every billionaire is policy failure, are going to vote for a little Republican billionaire developer to run the second largest city in the country. To which Cenk responded, I've never said that about billionaires. You can fill a whole social media platform with false assumptions and lies about me. Karen Bass telling us that she's the better establishment Democrat is a horrible campaign strategy. Democratic leadership thinks it's never time for change. Karen Bass is going to do nothing for the poor and working class in LA. That's why I can't stand her. It's wealthy neolibs who don't have to deal with the deterioration of LA as they sit in their mansions and wag their finger at us for not kowtowing to the Democratic Party. There is this persistent irrationality in American politics that people assume you love the person you're voting for and think they're perfect. No, it just means that they're better than the other choice. Why is it so hard for people to understand? It's an incredibly simple concept. And one of the most interesting statements that he made in regards to this was this. Bernie and Bass believe in working within the Democratic Party system, and what has that gotten us? Nearly nothing, just wall-to-wall corruption. Bernie said his friend Joe Biden would get us $15 minimum wage and much more. His friend screwed us, and he didn't say a word about it. So the guy whose strategy, since at least the 2016 election, has been vote blue no matter who, now he's going around saying that working within the Democratic Party has failed. It's like, then what the frick have you been doing for like 8 years? What have you been doing? This has been your strategy since you made it big in 2016. There's an entire wave of progressives that are going off of that mentality that you started. And now you're going around just saying, nope. That whole time, it was useless. No. Of course, Cenk is going to say this because he's just butthurt about the fact that Justice Democrats dumped him and the fact that he's not in Congress and they are. Like, Cenk is voting for the anti-homeless pro-police candidate because he's anti-homeless pro-police. Plain and simple. Like, Cenk Uygur earlier this year literally went around going like, defund the police is a terrible strategy, when, again, throughout the entire time, he was saying in the lead up to the 2020 election that defund the police, we need to defund the police. And now, he's saying, no, it's a bad idea. It's like, this is what I'm talking about when I say that Cenk Uygur, like, why I've never been a fan of Cenk Uygur for a while. It's like, he's empty vessel who just needs attention. A candidate like Karen Bass is something that most people would love. Like, most people in Cenk's position would love to have someone like Karen Bass on the ballot, because at the very least they can say she has some progressive credentials. And Cenk is still mad about this. It's like, again, literally, what is your plan then? Like, you have no plan. Like, Cenk's basically revealed, like, full blank, he has no plan at this point. If his whole, like, that was his whole plan from 2016, like, that was his plan, just as Democrats, okay? That was his biggest accomplishment. That's why I can't take people like Kyle and Cenk seriously when they talk about political strategy anymore. Because it's like, they say they had this strategy, okay? And now, they're saying that this strategy that they built has failed, but then they're going to go on and still somehow claim whatever. Like, Kyle, he still would go around and debate. Like, he was still challenging, like, Moving for People's Party guy, Nick Brana, to a debate, saying, like, yeah, I'll debate you on working within the Democratic Party versus working as a Moving for People's Party. But he always said, like, he'll concede, just as Democrats failed. And it's like, no, they didn't. If you say they failed, your strategy is nothing. And, like, you're picking the wrong time to do this. Cenk, the time to be, like, Bernie or bust, Moving for People's Party, third party route or whatever, or, like, Indie, Dem exit, whatever, that was, like, 2016. You chose Dem enter during that time. And now, in a time where you get flack for being Dem exit, now you're choosing Dem exit. It's like, what is it? Like, almost every political commentator, Cenk Uygur is, like, just an actual joke at this point. And that kind of leads into the next one, because even then, a joke is better than what's happening next. Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, was attacked at couple's home. Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was attacked with a hammer at the couple's San Francisco home. And before anybody who doesn't know the situation goes, well, that's interesting. This person broke into their house for no reason? No, the person very obviously was chanting, "Where is Nancy?" and said that he was going to wait for her to show up so he could beat her senseless too. And this story basically went around social media because the husband of the Speaker of the House was literally attacked in their home. Very bad thing. And then, as always happens with this sort of situations, now is when they start looking into their social media history, and they found out this person has been in the extreme political fringe for a while now. They're posting like all this conspiracy nut stuff, like QAnon, George Floyd related conspiracy stuff, a lot of anti-Semitism stuff. And then one big thing popped out because you learned this person was not always 100% a right-winger. This person used to be on the left. Apparently, their voter registration said that they had voted Green Party in previous elections. And going to their website, which I don't think I'm going to link, I don't think I should link it, but it's like their website included blog posts and video links, and a lot of their blog posts were referring to Tulsi Gabbard. But here's one big thing. Exactly 3 days before the incident happened, the guy posted a link to 2 Jimmy Dore videos about Ukraine, and then included like some text about like, the Jews or whatever, saying that like the Ukraine war was basically like a thing regarding Jews or whatever. And then Jimmy Dore decided to do something random funny. He basically played off any association that he had with the killer. And it's like, wow, the man couldn't even pretend to take this seriously. Because Jimmy Dore is now going to be put in court evidence. He's going to be in a police report now. And he's more than likely going to be put on an FBI watch list now. Because YouTube and the FBI don't take this kind of stuff lightly. I am fans of creators that this has happened to. Rusty Cage, a YouTuber whose most popular video was the last thing that a school shooter watched before he committed a massacre. And Monkey Jones, who apparently was in like the watch history of like a school shooter or whatever. And he got his channel taken down because of it. This isn't a game. He's literally in big trouble now. Anyways, to get on a more light subject, let's move on to the main topic of this video. And with this one, I've decided to make it abundantly clear that I can talk about any, group or whatever that I want. This isn't just going to be limited to American organizations. I can have issues with worldwide organizations too. And given this channel's history, there was literally no other organization worldwide that I could begin with other than this. However, with that, I have run out of worldwide organizations that I've probably lended my full-on support to. I mean, maybe you can give me other ones in the comments or whatever. Just because you give them doesn't mean that I'll do them right away. It just means I'll do them at one point. Probably. Maybe. And I should reiterate one thing. This is about organizations that I generally like, but have criticisms of. I'm not going to make a video talking about, far-right organizations around the world, because that's probably very abundantly clear about my problems with them. This is more for, self-reflection and self-criticism for the left. With that, let's get into it. First, a little bit of background. Movimiento de Generación Nacional, or MORENA, or if you're a filthy white person, National Regeneration Movement in English, is a Mexican political party started in 2014 by perennial political candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO. He formed it after the longtime leftist party, the PRD, signed something called the Pact for Mexico, a political agreement with the PRI and the PAN that was ideally made to bridge the partisanship of Mexico and bring everyone together to benefit the nation. It was mainly vague stuff that anybody could read into whatever they wanted, but 2 words struck AMLO: energy reform. As Mexico had nationalized their petroleum industry via the state-run petroleum entity Pemex, he was worried about what the PRIAN, which is a portmanteau of the PRI and the PAN, meant by energy reform. You see, a left-winger can read into energy reform as maybe environmentally conscious forms of energy, or more nationalization of the petroleum industry, or whatever. But, of course, right-wingers would probably read that as less privatization. And AMLO was weary, but the PRD assured him, no, it's all fine, it's all good. But due to this Pact for Mexico, it led to the privatization of Pemex. Since the PRD signed it, and by extension helped them do it, AMLO could no longer support them. As such, this new party was formed. And it was formed at just the right time, as Mexico had just elected one of their least popular presidents in its history, which includes a guy who massacred a bunch of students for fun, a guy who purposefully ignored a bunch of dying people in the wake of an earthquake, a person who was accused of assassinating their presidential candidate so he could appoint someone who he could control, a person who hired a bunch of fascist militia people to try and stay in power, and a person who basically became Mexico's dictator for 32 years. In fact, Enrique Peña Nieto was so unpopular, many people became nostalgic for the literal dictator. By that time, the Mexican populace had grown weary of the already established opposition parties, and they needed something new. Morena came in and offered something new, and that ended up leading them to become one of the most prominent political forces in Mexico, having 203 out of 500 deputies, 60 out of 128 senators, and 19 out of 32 of their governors. He's pushed for a lot of stuff to contrast Mexico's current neoliberal system via something called the Fourth Transformation, which includes expanding healthcare to near universal levels, ending the drug war, attempting to nationalize lithium, which he succeeded, electricity, which he failed, and petroleum, which is to be determined. And he's basically tried to push for other things to try and make Mexico better. Like, he didn't fully legalize gay marriage, but he's been trying to push for that agenda to be passed in state legislative branches. He's tried to end corruption via prosecuting past presidents, trying to push for a broader peace-based foreign policy, even becoming sort of a liaison to the broader Latin American left, as AMLO is more of a social democrat or a very mild democratic socialist, as opposed to a hardcore Chavismo. So he's been ready to stand up to help them when they need assistance from America. He's pushed for more worldwide affairs like Julian Assange and Snowden, that kind of stuff. Tried to help indigenous people. AMLO and Morena have basically trying to do a decent amount of good in Mexico, and I've given them a lot of praise. But as a lot of here's a fact of everything. Every single party, every single group, every single politician has a fair share of problems. And as you can tell by the title, this episode is going to detail just that. Some of my problems with Morena. Let's start with one of the biggest ones. One of AMLO's biggest things when he first made the party was that it wasn't going to just be a vehicle for him or his ideology or whatever. People have tried to say he is Lopez Obradorism, that's the party ideology. It's basically just a vehicle for him, and he's the cult of personality. But he's tried his best to try and make sure that that's not the case. And in Mexico, that can't really be the case because you really only have one term. You have only one term, so you really can't make your entire party's ideology on that. Especially when he can't run for anything else. He's essentially run for every office, and he's won almost every office, so he really doesn't have the ability to run for anything else. Which is why the media usually tries to smear him and say that he's gonna plot a re-election bid. But anyways, back to the subject. He has tried to make sure that the party is not just a vehicle for a particular section of Mexico. He wants this to be the new party of Mexico, like the PRI once was. The PRI tried to build themselves we're the party of Mexico, and you can tell by colors, they're the tricolor party. And one of the things that the PRI tried to do to try and help this be a thing was that the PRI was a Big Tent party. And while Morena is technically not a Big Tent party, it's definitely a moderately sized tent. And he was really open with letting anybody who wanted to join his party, as long as they were opposed to as long as they espoused some very basic stuff, we're anti-corruption and we're anti-neoliberalism. Essentially that was all they needed, at least for the short term. Maybe overall they would try to move them to their side, or if they joined their party, by extension they would be forced to support their ideology. But AMLO was very much we'll try to help, we're trying to change Mexico, and we can't turn away everybody if we want to change Mexico. This is supposed to be a unified movement to help fix Mexico for the better. And broadly, that's a good idea. Great. Wonderful. As long as you're getting them to agree on their terms. And for the most part, AMLO does get them to agree on his terms. like his terms or MORENA's terms, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily work out. Now, very rarely do they let people from like the PAN or the PRI, maybe they'll let the PRI, like they'll definitely let people from the PRD leave because the PRD is like the left-wing party, and I think MC, but like very rarely will they let someone from like PAN do it. Maybe people from the PRI, because the PRI, again, big tent party, so you could technically argue there could be left-wingers in the party. There may have been one member of the PAN that changed their affiliation to vote for MORENA in a very recent election, but I can't for the life of me figure out or remember who it is. But there is one person I remember that AMLO let join his little party, like MORENA allowed to enter their ranks, that I'm like, really? Really? That person being Porfirio Muñoz Ledo. Now, for those who need a brief history of who Porfirio Muñoz Ledo is, Ledo was basically like, he was basically like a part of like PRI's left flank in the late 70s, early 80s, I think. And then like he was like mad that he was being snubbed by the party heads because of his leftward leanings, and left to form the PRD with Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, son of the PRI's most popular president, Lázaro Cárdenas. And AMLO, being a young person at the time, would join up with their little group and basically become a youth activist for them. And those three formed a little bit of a bond, but then they would end up splitting up. It's like all three of them hate each other for some reason. I don't get it. Now, basically, what happened was Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas really wanted to remain the PRD, like, torchbearer. And Porfirio Muñoz Ledo was like, hey, it's my turn. And Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas was like, no, my turn. It's always my turn. And then Porfirio Muñoz Ledo decided to leave and join up with another leftward party. And then, due to the hatred that he felt with Cuauhtémoc, he ended up dropping out of the presidential race entirely and then endorsed Vicente Fox for the presidency instead. And then when it was time for the next cycle, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas wanted to run for the presidency again. But this time, AMLO had become a popular force within the PRD, so they chose to nominate him instead of Cuauhtémoc. And due to this, Cuauhtémoc decided that he would not be backing AMLO, at least publicly. I don't think he backed anybody else, but like he was very openly like not backing AMLO. Like I don't think he didn't openly say like he's not backing AMLO, but he was like, it was very obvious. Like he wasn't campaigning for AMLO, and he wasn't like giving speeches for AMLO. He wasn't like doing whatever for AMLO. And a lot of PRD members criticized him for this. And then he in turn resigned from a lot of his positions within the party, essentially indicating that he wanted to do a retirement. And then Porfirio Muñoz Ledo basically just zigzagged everywhere on the Mexican political spectrum until he wound up being in MORENA, because AMLO, again, would welcome anybody with open arms. However, I would have raised suspicion about the fact that this guy was basically cozy with the Mexican political establishment and then just joins up with the coalition. But things didn't become more apparent until the MORENA leadership election happened, where Muñoz Ledo decided that he was going to run for that position. And he made it very open that the only reason he was running for that position was so that he could very openly critique AMLO from his own party, trying to sow party disunity. But that is significantly less noticeable than when AMLO forms like coalitions with other political parties, which can also lead to some very interesting outcomes. The most tame one of all of them is PT. Like, PT is Mexico's socialist political party. Like, they're the furthest left, like, mainstream party in Mexico. They're not really that, like, bad, all things considered. The most you get is, like, they're, like, a little bit tanky. Like, one of the things, a lot of them were involved with the Mexican Friends of Russia thing. But overall, that was more of, like, a universal thing. There were some members of the PRI who were backing that idea. But, like, again, the PT, not that bad. Now, the other two that they formed coalitions with have been a bit more interesting. First was PVEM. PVEM is a center-right environmentalist party that has a lot of history with corruption. Like, they literally hired a bunch of movie theaters to play ads for PVEM in them, and even when the Electoral Commission told them, you're not allowed to do that, they just said, screw you, we're doing it anyways. And then, of course, just general levels of corruption, party heads getting money for favors or whatever. But the thing about this one is that PVEM usually just forms a coalition with whoever's in power. So it's like, again, it's like weird, but it's like, I guess it technically makes sense. But the most controversial one was when they joined a coalition with the Social Encounter Party, a hard-right evangelical political party. The thing is, they didn't really have to form a coalition with them, other than the fact that they would have had like a 2-member coalition as opposed to a 3-member coalition. Really, the coalition only benefited the Social Encounter Party, and not even that, because they didn't even reach a certain threshold to stay as a viable political party. And the stated reason was that they believed in inclusion, which, I mean, okay, but like, again, to this end, I guess it technically did work out beneficial, because I guess it was on AMLO's terms, or MORENA's terms. So there's that. One of the larger criticisms of MORENA/AMLO is revolving around women. It's ranging from like they are a bit tone deaf on women's issues to this party is like openly misogynist. Okay, so one of the big things that is a point of contention was in the fact that femicides have doubled since MORENA took power. And people argue that AMLO and MORENA should be doing a lot more to address the problem. To which I say, kind of fair, but it's like, what can he do that does not go against his ideology of a more conciliatory criminal justice system? Like, AMLO and MORENA's whole thing was like, abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets. But a more salient one came from the controversy surrounding the 2021 Guerrero gubernatorial race. In 2021, MORENA chose to nominate a person by the name of Felix Salgado Macedonio to be their nominee in the gubernatorial race of Guerrero. Felix was a very popular left-wing politician there, a deputy, 2-time governor candidate, and incumbent senator, which was good for them in an electoral sense, considering it was a swing seat between the left party and the PRI, so having this well-known politician could probably push them over the edge. However, problems arose when, during the campaign, Felix was accused by multiple women of sexual harassment. Now, depending on how the party responds, this could range from something very good or very bad. Like if the party took swift action to try and mitigate this or whatever, then maybe things could have been going smoothly. However, MORENA didn't really have a particular thing to do with this. Like, they really didn't know. Like, the party was incredibly divided on what to do. Their general secretary, Citlali Hernandez, led the charge to get Felix removed as candidate for said reason. But unfortunately, a lot of party heads had defended Felix from the accusations, including AMLO, who claimed that the accusations were simply neoliberals trying to stop the fourth transformation. And when this happened, I was like, AMLO, no, why? Don't do this, no. Now their party chair, Mario Delgado, pushed for an investigation and concluded that it was in the best interest of everybody that Felix was no longer the candidate, and that a new process would be held to choose a new nominee. And it's like, okay, fine, fair enough, whatever. However, for some reason, MORENA, when they decided to do this process again, didn't, like, forbid Felix from running, and or Felix just didn't get the memo to not run again. So then he decided to run again, and he ended up winning again. And by that point, they decided, okay, our hands are tied, we don't know what to do. And it wasn't until Felix was forbidden from running altogether, because during that period of him campaigning for the renomination, he didn't turn in paperwork for money, because technically he wasn't a candidate. It wasn't until then that he was forced to not be the candidate. Now, there are some other criticisms, like, oh, MORENA isn't living up to their expectations, when it's like, okay, they ran, and they came into office with like an 80% approval rating. Of course, they weren't going to live up to everybody's expectations. Or maybe people would criticize certain bills that they proposed. Like, there was this recent one where it was like they agreed with like the PRI on a security bill, and I was like, that was a bit weird. But like, again, broadly, the organization is good. I think the organization is good. I wouldn't have publicly supported MORENA or have AMLO in my banner or anything of that sort if I didn't give my support to them. I still support AMLO, MORENA, or whoever they choose to nominate in 2024, Scheinbaum. And again, this is more of just like giving them criticisms. If we don't criticize the people that we like, then they'll never get better. That can never go to me because I'm already perfect. With that, I'll close the video out here. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when the future video line comes out. And if there's more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.